Hi there, welcome to another video in the series looking at upgrading components to Joomla 4, and in this video we're going to look at the last two topics here, HTML snippets and the user interface changes. So this is really going to be the last video looking at the upgrading. Now if you're on this upgrading to Joomla 4 on the tutorial page, we're going to be covering chapters 10 and 11 on this page here. There are a number of miscellaneous changes here to do with version history and tags and that sort of stuff, but you can read about those. They're fairly esoteric stuff. So we're going to be looking at HTML snippets and user interface changes. Now what I mean by HTML snippets, I mean little bits of HTML that you can use throughout your component, little bits of library HTML. And there's a couple of ways that Joomla provides. One is by using layouts, and layouts doesn't seem to have changed in Joomla 4, so I'm not really going to cover anything about those. The other is this little function here, jhtml::_, which has been replaced by HtmlHelper _, and we're going to look at that in just a moment. But before we look at that, the first thing I'd like to cover is about icons. So in Joomla 3 we had the standard icon fonts used. So if you output an icon, you got one of these, which were within the icon library. With Joomla 4, we've got these ones here, and this is a cheat sheet page of Font Awesome site, and they seem to be quite popular these days on the web. So Joomla is now using those. You can find them in this file here. We'll actually just open that file. I think we're on media, and if we go down to templates, administrator, atom, CSS, and vendor, Font Awesome free. And this is the file containing those Font Awesome kind of fonts and icons there, and you see a number. There's a number beginning with FA, which map to the Font Awesome icons here, and then you'll see a number which begin with icon, like this one, and these are particularly ones that seem to be used within Joomla 4 and defined by the Joomla team, but they're really referring to the same icons as the Font Awesome ones. Are just a different name for them, but there will be special CSS which is attached to these ones as well, you know, for sizes and color and those sorts of things. So they're very easy to use. You just insert them like this. So I have got the hello world here. So if we wanted to say insert an icon, we can just go to our live default.php file. If we go to administrator, components, hello world templates, and here's the default.php, and if we go down to somewhere like where's a good place, say before the access here, and we just want there, and we'll put in just what it says here. And then we'll save that and reload this page. And you can see it's just put a Joomla home icon just at that point at the beginning of the access. So it's very easy to put in. You can also put in the Font Awesome ones which aren't used by Joomla. And in this case, I'm just going to copy the class actually. And I'm going to leave the FA out for now. Save that and reload. And you see it comes up with something a little funny there, which is because the font awesome fonts use a kind of like a private area in the scheme of UTF-8 or whatever it is. It's just showing FI08 or FID8 depending on what it is here. If I go to paper plain, you can see this is FID8, so it's just putting out the number of the characters. So you need to put in FA, and that really tells it to use the font awesome fonts for this number range. And then if we click on that again, should see the little paper plane come up, and there it is. Okay, so as I said, very easy to use. You just put them in like that, and it uses a particular CSS trick to change the class into content before, so it actually inputs a character with the number, UTF-8 number of this. So that's fonts. The next thing I wanted to cover was HtmlHelper. So as I mentioned, this is the new version of what was previously JHTML_, and as you probably remember, you get these everywhere whenever you're outputting HTML. So if I look in this default.php file, you can see that HtmlHelper, it's kind of all over the place. And we've got search tools, grid, search tools, sorting, grid, JGrid. So there's a lot of HtmlHelper functions that are used here, and the way it works is that the first string here identifies the class, and the second part of the string here defines or identifies the function within the class. And the way it kind of maps from the class to, or from the string to the class, is a bit different in version 4, because it uses this HTML registry class, and that maps the class identifier, i.e. JGrid as a string, to the class name. And then when this is running, it'll look for that class, and it will run the function within that class, and it will pass the additional parameters to it. So in the example of JGrid, it will point to this class here, JGrid, and we have got one here which is Hello World Administrator, which points to this administrator service. So if we look at our code here, this is our administrator service, and this is what is used for outputting the associations. And you can see it's getting the associations and outputting those on the page. So it's putting out this bit here. So let's look a bit more about that. So this HTML registry, the first thing to note, it is different from Joomla registry. So you may well have come across a class called registry, which is kind of like a utility class for managing bits of data and taking bits of data in and out, used throughout Joomla. This is a completely different class, and if we go to the API, you'll find it under the Joomla namespace, and it will be under HTML registry. So here's its methods: get service, has service, and register. They're a completely different class from the other registry class which you would find under the framework. So let's just have a look at the code for that. it'll be under libraries, which will be up here. Sorry, down here, libraries source, and it should be under HTML. There it is there. So here's that registry class, and you can see the functions there: get service, has service, and register. And you can see here is the service map, which maps each of those strings. Here's JGrid, for example, which maps it to helpers / JGrid :class, which is basically the string containing the fully qualified name of this class here. It's not, there's no use statement, so this will be in the same folder as this registry.php, except that it'll be under the helpers. So you can find JGrid here, and there's the code for the JGrid, which actually outputs the little character which indicates a padlock to indicate that a record is locked. So this registry class, as I said, maps the strings used in HtmlHelper, the first part, the first parameter, to classes, and the singleton class is got from the DI container. So this is the last little bit of the puzzle concerning our provider.php, because this registry class here is what we do here. So here we're getting that same registry class, Joomla CMS HTML registry, and we're getting it out of the DI container whenever we kind of run this. And then in our extension, if we look at our extension, we see that in our boot we have this get registry, which is basically getting what we set as the registry here. So we get back this registry instance, and we're registering Hello World Administrator as this new administrator service. So if we go back to the slides, here is our Hello World Administrator mapping to the administrator service class, and in our code we're using the register function to add this into this service map, basically. Okay, so usually component-specific functions added to HTML registry in extension boot. So you may remember that our extension class is instantiated a number of times, be instantiated by the router if necessary, or other bits of functionality within Joomla, other components wanting to attach to our component. But the boot function is only called whenever Joomla wants to run our component and grab its contents to put in the outputs. That's the only case where the boot component is used, or the boot functionality is called. And so in our boot, what we can do is set up these registry entries to point functions, or point these class identifiers to the services. Now the other thing to note about this is that it allows you to override those Joomla classes. So we're just going to do that. I've actually done part of the work here, because I've taken this JGrid here, and as I mentioned, the JGrid is what you get whenever you, if I edit this, for example, and go and edit it, it will mark it as locked. So whenever we see it's editing there and I refresh this, it will then mark this with a little lock symbol, and that is output by JGrid. And if we look at the JGrid code, we can see that there's a function called checked out. Let me find it. Oh, check. Spell it correctly. Here's checked out, and it does various things, but it calls basically this action function, and the action function is the bit that outputs the HTML, as you can see here. So it's putting out bits of HTML, and particularly it's outputting the icon class here, and that from the active class that's passed in. And if you look at the active class in the parameters of action, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and inactive class is 8. So what I've done here is in checked out, here's our 7th and 8th parameter, and you can see it's passing something called checked out. And if we actually go to our font awesome here, here it is. It's got the CSS class icon checked out, and it's putting before it is putting this F023. And if we go to font awesome and we look for F023, you can see that is what it's outputting there, that lock symbol. So what I've done in the code is I've created created something called HtmlHelper, and I've said that it extends JGrid, which is what the class is there, and I've overridden the checked out function, and all I've changed is I've changed this to folder. So if you go back to here and you go to folder, there's one over here. So this should be the icon that is output whenever it's run. So say I've changed this to folder. Now we need to tell Joomla to use this version rather than JGrid. And so if it's checked out, it will use this. If it's anything else, it will just use JGrid. So you can do that in your Hello World component, and you can do it like this. By doing the same sort of thing, you register JGrid, but register the JGrid helper instead, and you just got to pass true as the third parameter so that it replaces what's there. But what I was going to do was just put it into our default.php, because the thing about the class here, the single class, the HTML registry class, it's just got from the main DI container. So if we looked at our services provider.php, we're not actually putting one in to our child container, we're just getting one out from the main container. So we can basically get that out anytime that we like. So I'll get it out at the top of this file here, and let's go, and so we need to get the container, and we'll say factory get container should do it, and then we need to do the registry equals container, and then we need to do get, and we need to pass the fully qualified name of the registry that we're using. So if we go back to here, we can find that from here, registry. Oh, we'll have to go to services provider.php file, registry. So here it is here. And then what we're going to do is register, and we're going to register our JGrid helper class. So we can use HtmlHelper class, and we're going to get it. Sorry, we need to use JGrid first, and we're going to pass it like that. And we need to define this, obviously, which our JGrid helper, and this is here. So we need to get the namespace. And it's in JGrid helper. So hopefully that will work. We're getting the container from there. We're finding from the container this entry here. And then we're using that registry, which is got back from the container, and registering JGrid as JGrid helper. And we'll save that and see if it works. There, it did. Okay. So you can just see the folder symbol against it. So in this way you can override those HTML underscore functions with whatever functionality you want to put onto your own component. Okay, let's go look at administrator template. So with the new version of Joomla, the both the administrator template and the Cassiopeia site template are new. So there's a fair few changes to do. So if you compare the this obviously with what we had before, there's a lot of changes in how the administrator functionality is presented. So it's a fair few changes that you have to make in association with making it align with the Atom template. Some of those are listed here. For example, there's no sidebars. So these things here which slide in and out really aren't present here because we use this basically up and down to get through those. Bootstrap, they use Bootstrap 5, so a lot of the CSS classes that were there, row fluid and span 3 and this sort of thing, need to be changed. Where you have modals and that sort of stuff, you need to change, and in particular if you're using a data attribute in a class, you probably need to put in BS in the middle, so data dismiss goes to data BS dismiss. Buttons and links, buttons used for actions in forms and links used for URLs. So there's a number of changes listed down here. Sidebars, CSS classes, fonts and links, the categories. I actually thought that the categories here, you've got categories in this sort of thing here. I thought that was new in Joomla 4, but it actually is present in Joomla 3 as well. So if we go to content categories, you can actually see, this is Joomla 3.10, you can actually see that they're here as well. So as I say, number of changes which you'll need to do to make your administrator functionality work with this template, and really it's too many to cover in the tutorial code, so most of them haven't been done. The final thing is the site template. So with Joomla 4 they introduced a new site template, and it to be honest, I've been very impressed with it. You can see a demo of it at this place here, Joomla 4, there it is there, and you can see the main thing. If you go down here, you can see how it's responsive, so it'll work on mobiles very well. If you look at how it's structured with CSS grid here for this main bit here. So on, this is like a full PC version. On mobile versions, these sidebars will drop down to after the component area here. All of these below top banner, top end things are flex fields, so they are where you put your modules, so you can use them as you can find your modules going horizontally or down within this area, and then it'll all go nicely responsive as you decrease the device size. So it's well worth looking at Cassiopeia. I've developed a site using it. I know it's worked very well. I'm going to change another site to use it instead of a third-party template that I got. One of the big things is that it enables child templates, not just Cassiopeia, but Joomla4 in general. And if you're used to WordPress and how easy child templates are used to WordPress, you'll be also impressed with Joomla4, because it makes the job of creating a child template possible and avoids some of the problems that we had in the past. So overall, that's Joomla4 for you. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find your components work well with it. Thanks for watching this series of videos. Bye.